So in the last video, we looked at using the Google External Keywords tool for keyword discovery. And these were some of the keywords that I found there. And I have them open here in a text editor. So let's validate these terms. Let's take a look at bridal rings. So I'm just going to copy that term to my clipboard. And let's actually search it and see what comes up. This is how we're going to validate it. Okay, so let's evaluate the results. The first result is bridalrings.com. When someone has good relevancy on page, good inbound links, and good metadata, and the URL, that's very powerful. It's going to be very difficult to dislodge this URL from number one. Let's look who else is there. Zales, heard of them, big company. Probably going to be pretty tough to dislodge them. Overstock, they have an excellent SEO program. Walmart, Amazon. We keep seeing this company come up. Takori, I don't know them. Maybe you do if you know jewelry. Sam's Club, big company. Heiselberg, first place position for engagement rings. JCPenney and K.com. So you see the same, either huge companies, huge global brands coming up, or companies that keep sort of ranking for different terms around engagement rings and bridal rings and that sort of thing. So they probably have a pretty good SEO program. If I'm just getting started, I'm probably not going to go for a term like this. It's going to be too competitive. Better for me to introduce a keyword modifier and splinter down the results. So let's put a modifier in there. We'll go with discount bridal rings. And now Overstock's right on top. And now we start to see some other organizations we never heard of. I never heard of It Shot. I never heard of Secret Diamond, Super Jeweler, Jewel Ocean, WeddingRingsDepot.com. So now we're starting to get into an area where we might be able to compete. But let's see if there's any volume for a term like this. So I'm going to copy the search phrase to my clipboard and head on over to Google. And I'm going to search Insights. And I'm going to hit Google Insights for search. And this is going to tell me how much of volume there is for discount bridal rings. How many people are actually searching this term. And I'm looking worldwide, but let's say I'm just US. Let's narrow it down to just US. And I'll reissue the search. There's no volume at all for discount bridal rings. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm not going to optimize my site for that term, because I've got to think people are searching that term. And if, in fact, I do have discount bridal rings, even though there's not a lot of volume, those who do search it and come to my site are likely to convert, because that is, in fact, what they're looking for. But let's look at this versus cheap bridal rings. And let's see if there's any volume for that. So the terms mean the same thing, whether it's discount bridal rings or cheap bridal rings. If you're talking to an English language speaker, you're saying the same thing, but you see nobody searches for discount bridal rings. So you may be sitting there in your marketing department thinking, you know, we don't want to call ourselves cheap. We're more comfortable with discount. Let's go with discount. But the truth is, from an SEO standpoint, if you SEO'd your site for discount bridal rings rather than cheap bridal rings, you would be leaving all this traffic to your competitors. Let's look also at wholesale bridal rings. Nothing for that. Now, it's interesting, you know, these are not absolute numbers, they're relative. So relative to discount bridal rings and wholesale bridal rings, cheap bridal rings has more volume. And this is sort of a hollow number, 30. It's not 30 searches or 30,000. It just says in relationship to the two, there's more search volume for cheap bridle rings than these ones. Let's throw bridle rings in there and see what that does to the numbers that we're looking at. So that sort of turns the apple cart on its head, because in relationship to bridle rings, very few people are searching cheap bridle rings. But I can't compete in the bridle ring category because all these big companies are all over it already. I'm never going to be able to elbow my way in. So what I might do is start with cheap bridle rings. Let's remove this and look at the geography of that search. And I can do that by just scrolling down here. Not enough volume to see what's going on from a geography standpoint. I'll put that back so that you can see what that would look like. This will be interesting because we'll see what parts of the United States most people are getting married in right now. Huh. Let's look at it for bridle rings. See if we see anything. Ah, we do. Okay. So, Louisiana, Alabama, West Virginia, Arkansas, Kentucky, Mississippi, Utah, Oklahoma, Tennessee, South Carolina. So this could mean two things. It could mean that the term bridal rings is a term that's more used in these places, or that in fact there are more people getting married there. Down below the geography of the search, I can also see the top searches and the rising searches. So discount engagement ring, interesting. So even though there's no search volume for discount engagement rings here in the graph, what this shows me is that within the last 6 months, there are more people searching discount engagement rings. If you're a hockey fan or you enjoy watching hockey, then you know that the object of the game is to anticipate where the puck is going to be, because the game moves so quickly. So they say skate to where the puck is going to be, not where it was. If you wanted to use that type of a strategy for search engine optimization and go after terms that are breaking big in the last 6 months, discount engagement rings would be a good term to go for. So I guess what I've figured out here is that I can't get in on bridle rings. It's too competitive. There is some volume for cheap bridle rings, so I'm going to go for that. And then discount bridle rings is a breakout term that's got a lot of search over the last 6 months. So the two terms that validated here were discount bridle rings and cheap bridle rings. What I might do is start linking that phrase, discount bridle rings, in my blog back to my store, cheap bridle rings in my press releases that I release over a newswire back to the store, try to get coverage on other blogs, and have that phrase as anchor text linked back to my store. And then after I start ranking for discount bridle rings and cheap bridle rings, after my website actually starts emerging in Google when you search those terms, then and only then would I try to drop the word discount and start to rank for bridle rings, right? If I could start to rank for bridle rings then, after a while, because I start now linking the term bridle rings back to my site, then if I'm competitive in that category, I could try to drop bridle and try to rank for just rings. That's how it works. You start with the modifiers, you try to rank for your keyword or phrase with modifiers as part of the phrase, and then as you start to compete and actually emerge in the search result ranks for those terms, you can start to drop off the modifier and go for a more narrow term.